Pettengill House Incorporated, the executive director there. Kelly Dunne, who is chief operations officer with Jeanne Geiger for more than 2 decades. And Lila Teeters, who's the president of the board of directors of the YWCA. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for being here. We are going to talk tonight with these 3 organizations about a broad reach of what their organization's scope is. The second question that we're going to ask them speaks specifically to their client base in COVID and around racial issues. And then thirdly, and the place where we're going to spend the most amount of time is actually on the third part, which is what they do in their organizations and how they need our help. So we're going to ask you tonight to donate freely to these 3 organizations, and I'm going to ask Julie Cook to put their web addresses in our chat box. There will be a lot going on in the chat box that I invite you to participate in. So the 3 organizations we would love to see your donations go to freely, as well as volunteer opportunities that will be coming along this evening, and to the organization blacklivesmatter.com. Thank you so much. I want to thank Julie Cook, who's managing the waiting room, and she's my right hand. Debbie Hart-Klein is going to be managing your chats and questions, and Maria Chanin will be taking notes from the organizations so that we can follow up with you all with an email tomorrow or over the weekend so that you can have hard facts in front of you about how to help these organizations. So tonight, as I said, is about a call to action. You know, the Huddle, the Women in Action Huddle of Greater Newburyport and PEG Center for Art and Activism are the sponsors of tonight's event. And the Huddle has always been an educational tool. We've been in business since the inauguration in 2017. But tonight feels like a turning point for us. We want to be educators, but this is really a call to action as well. We're really asking people to get themselves involved in their local communities and help in a way that really matters. And we think that tonight is all about that. So I invite you that as you're listening tonight, check in with your heart, see what volunteer opportunities really resonate with you or not, and follow up in that way. And finally, I just want to say congratulations to all 3 organizations who have been the recipients of grants from both the Cummings Center and others, which I can get into later, but congratulations to you all. So we're going to begin with a PowerPoint and with Deb Smith from Pettengill House. So we are at a community roundtable, and thank you very much from the Huddle and PEG Center for being here. Tonight's lineup will go in this order: Deborah Smith, Kelly Dunne, and Lila Teeters. And the topics that we hope to cover tonight is a brief overview of your organization and the people you serve. How has COVID-19 spotlighted injustice in the communities you serve? What in your work is related to racial injustice? And finally, what do your organizations most need from our community? How can we help? So here's Pettengill House. It's quite a lineup, it really is. I'm just gonna move this so I can see it. Deborah Smith is the executive director of Pettengill House in Salisbury, Mass. In collaboration with community partners, it provides wraparound services to support at-risk individuals, children, and families through education, intervention, and a therapeutic system of care. Pettengill addresses individual and family unit concerns one step at a time, with its primary concern in meeting the most basic human needs of food, clothing, shelter, health, and safety. Amesbury Mayor Cassandra Gove recently initiated a partnership with the Pettengill House Incorporated to create a donation and assistance portal for Amesbury residents, which has been named Aid for Amesbury. Volunteers. And here's the mission statement: to support and empower individuals, children, and families by providing education, comprehensive care management, and basic needs by coordinating community supports that contribute to individual and family stabilization, personal growth, and development. So I'm going to stop here and just ask Deb Deborah Smith, can you give us an overview of Pettengill House in a broad stroke? What do you do for the community, and what is your scope? We have to unmute you, Julie. There we go.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here tonight and representing Pettengill House. So we are a nonprofit social service agency, and I think you covered a lot of it, Paula, so thank you. You did your homework. And we provide annually support services. We have about 20 different programs. And as you outlined, education is the cornerstone of everything we do. But usually stabilization is the first thing that we actually work on with folks. And it's to make sure that people are stabilized enough with their basic need deficits so that they can move forward. And those deficits would include food, clothing, shelter, and safety. And we have a therapeutic system of care model that really is a wraparound service support approach. And we work with 25, probably 50 local partners and state providers, and have contracts in all of those areas. We do have a site still in Salisbury, but it's really for basic needs. It's for our pantry and those kind of things. And our main office is on Water Street in Amesbury. We moved there a few years ago. We provide services in 9 local communities to the 3,000 people, and that's Greater Newburyport. And if you think of the school districts of Amesbury, Newburyport, Triton, and Pentucket, those are all our communities. I think the main thing that we really do is the comprehensive case management, and that really is the umbrella of everything, because we try to meet people exactly where they are, what they need. We work together to kind of assess and identify what the needs are. All of our programs have built-in mandates. We really want to raise people up, and they have built-in mandates, and they're all self-determination and self-sufficiency based. We are sometimes referred to as a tier 2 responders, because we do a lot of crisis intervention, and we're like a triage really with the assessment. And some of the organizations that we work with, 2 of them are with us tonight, the YWCA and of course Jeanne Geiger. We go way back with both of those organizations. We also make sure that we're all working together for best practices to avoid duplication of services, and also at the lowest cost. So we've never lost in the 25 years really that kind of grassroots approach, so that people can access services in their own backyard, and we know the community well. So I think that's basically what we do.
What I loved about your mission statement was that it covers a holistic approach to a client, that you are trying to help with their basic needs, but you don't leave it there. You turn the basic needs into positive affirmations and forward movement for each person.
Absolutely. And sometimes people come through the door and they don't know what they need. So they work with a social worker, kind of look at the goals and assess things and move. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We move up that. We don't try to plug somebody into a program that they're not ready for. So, and it's been very successful.
And do the people who start with you end up staying with you loyally? And I imagine some become volunteers even in your organization.
Well, that's a great question, because it varies. We've had some. I've been there 23 years, and we have some families that are continuing to work with us for an array of reasons. By the way, most of the families and individuals that we work with, I'm in awe of, because how they put one foot in front of the other every day is like, they're heroes to me. So I've learned a lot from them. So yeah, so some come for a short period of time. Maybe they've just had some hard luck, especially now we're seeing a lot more, obviously, clients. They may need some support as far as basic needs and stabilization. And some are there for a long time. It's interesting because I just communicated with one of our former clients. And she was in one of our youth programs, and now she has a master's of social work and wants to connect. So yeah, it's a huge success story. And to think that we have any part of that is quite an honor.
It is. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to Kelly Dunne now from the Jeanne Geiger Crisis Center. Kelly, you are the Chief Operations Officer there, and the impact that your organization has had on our community is so huge. I'm going to just show some of the things. Sorry. Stop share. I'll try that again. I'll start here. Sorry. I'm a little stuck, I think. Oh, that's too bad. One more time. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Oh, there we go. Jeanne Geiger. So Kelly Dunne is the Chief Operations Officer at Jeanne Geiger Crisis Center. I'm going to go back one, sorry. I'm having a little trouble here with this. Okay. Dunne has focused her work on analyzing organizations created to protect victims and hold offenders accountable. This is just amazing to me. Sorry. Just little technical issues here, right? Okay. In 2003, after the tragic domestic violence homicide of one of her clients, Kelly created the center's nationally acclaimed domestic violence high-risk team model, which seeks to reduce domestic violence homicides and reassaults by employing risk assessment practices to identify potentially lethal offenders, establishing case-specific multidisciplinary responses, and coordinating the monitoring of high-risk domestic violence cases. The DVHRT model has been replicated in over 25 communities across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and in several other states. Dunne was named a 2006 Community Unsung Heroine by the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women in 2006. So I'm having trouble with the mission statement coming up. So Kelly, I'm just gonna put it on to you. Can you unmute her, Julie, please? What is the mission of the Jeanne Geiger Crisis Center, and what are your overarching programs here in this area?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion tonight. I'm so glad to be here sharing space with you all. So the organization really exists to end domestic violence, and we really do that through engaging communities and empowering individuals. And our services are vast, and I think that the easiest way to think about them is sort of in 4 components. So the heart of the organization is our survivor services. So in Amesbury, we have a location where we have advocates and counselors and lawyers at work assisting survivors that come to us every day. So they may come to us after a police call for help the night before. They may come to us because they don't know if what they're experiencing in their relationship is domestic violence, and they're confused and they're scared about what they're experiencing at home. So we serve about 1,300 survivors through that office in Amesbury. The other part of our work is really around working with men who use violence. So this is new to us. 20 years ago, this would have been very frowned upon to do work with men who use violence. But the truth is you have to look at both aspects of this, and that many of our survivors don't want to leave their relationship. They just want the violence to end. And so there is a court-ordered program in Massachusetts for men who commit domestic violence crimes are ordered to a 40-week court-ordered abuser education program. So we run a program across the North Shore, a court-ordered program for men who use violence. Then our other work is really our work with youth. And really there, we're trying to change the culture around violence. You know, we know all violence is connected. Bullying is connected to community violence, is connected to domestic violence. And so we work with youth to really try to change the culture. One of our youth empowerment programs is Girls Inc., a program that's near and dear to my heart, where we really work to create strong, smart, and bold girls. And that's, we do some incredible work with girls through that programming. And then the last piece of our work is where I've been focusing the last couple of years, which is statewide and national on reducing the rate of domestic violence homicides. So we see 3 women a day killed by domestic violence homicides, and that doesn't count the women and children and friends and bystanders that are also killed in those tragic events. We just had a homicide of a woman 2 weeks ago in the Commonwealth. We don't typically go more than 2 or 3 weeks without a homicide of a woman due to domestic violence.
Wow.
And so we do this based on a model we created right here. After the murder of a woman in Amesbury, we really saw that the system was broken and needed reform. And so we went about doing that. And we brought police and prosecutors together at the table, probably for the first time, to talk about the fact that not all women who are really at risk of being killed want to go into shelter. And we needed to do something to allow women to stay in the community and also stay safe. And so that model has been replicated. We now have 2 grants from the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women to work across the country replicating that model. So we now have teams in California and Texas and New York that really replicate the model that we created right here in our community. So those are sort of the 4 components of the program: survivor services, working with youth, working with men who use violence, and then working nationally and statewide and locally, reducing the rate of domestic violence homicide.
What about Kelly? You must work pretty closely with the police department?
We do.
I mean, here and in other communities. Have they been amenable? Are they open? Are they workable? Do you work well together?
Mm-hmm. So I've been doing this work for 22 years. As I told you, the relationship with the police has not always been easy. Back in the day, it was much more challenging. But really the way to do this work is together. And really through the high risk team, it's brought us around the table. We come around the table once a month and we talk about the most dangerous cases in the community, and we partner with them to try to provide better interventions. And so really the police have become close partners of ours in this work. We've learned a lot more about their work. They've learned about our work. Really the solution is in coming together. And so we work very closely.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to Lila Teeters, who is the president of the board of the YWCA. And instead of using a PowerPoint that doesn't seem to be cooperating tonight, I'm just going to read your mission, which has been your mission for some decades now. The YWCA is dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Lila Teeters is the president of the YWCA's board of directors. Teeters began working with the Y while she was still a student at Kentucky Regional High School and served as a team member of the board. She returned to the organization in 2015 to support the YW's work on affordable housing, racial justice, and youth development. When not working with the YW, Lila is a legal historian and PhD candidate. She's an Andrew Mellon Fellow at Massachusetts Historical Society and a recipient of a William Nelson Cromwell Foundation Early Career Fellowship. So, Lila, give us the broad stroke of the YWCA, which I bet every single person on this call has experienced in our community.
Great, thank you. And thank you again for organizing this event. It's really important for organizations like the YW, and I'm really happy to be here with you all this evening, even if it's virtually. So as you said, the mission of the YWCA is to eliminate racism and empower women, which is a very lofty goal. But the YWCA Newburyport has really chosen to work towards that mission through economic empowerment in the community. And we serve all people in the greater Newburyport area. So again, I think as Deb pointed out, it's useful to think about it in terms of school districts. So that's Amesbury, Triton, Pentucket, Newburyport. I live in Exeter, and we still do work up in this area, so we're very expansive. But really, so how we get at the mission through economic empowerment is through affordable housing, through affordable childcare, youth leadership program, and wellness programming. So I'll talk a little bit about affordable housing first. The YWCA Newburyport is one of the oldest providers of affordable housing in the North Shore, which we're very proud of. When we opened in the late 1800s, we provided affordable housing for women who were coming to the area to work. And we're one of the largest providers of affordable housing in this area right now. We have over 60 tenants. We just opened a couple of new affordable housing apartment areas, and we're really looking to address Massachusetts' homeless rate, which is much higher than the national average due to the price of housing. So this is something that we're very passionate about and something that we've been expanding upon over the last couple of years. We're also, as a organization that is dedicated to empowering women, we're very conscious of the connection between homelessness, sexual assault, and female empowerment. So we also get at the mission that way. In terms of childcare, the childcare services that we provide are offered on a sliding scale. So that means that the amount that people pay for childcare is tied to their income. And as a single mom with a 4-year-old, I know how expensive childcare is, and that is such a gift to the community. So we look to empower women and everyone who needs childcare so that they can provide for their families. We also provide a voucher system. So if you have a voucher with the state, you can use that towards our childcare services. In our childcare facilities, we also are very proud of the racial justice education that we do with our young children. So it's never too early to start racial justice work. And I'm happy to go a little bit more into that in the Q&A. Also with youth leadership, so as Paula mentioned, I started out as a team member on the board, and that's something that the board has been doing since I think 2006 or 2007. And it's a really great way to bring younger voices onto our board, but also to really cultivate young women as leaders. So they run one of our subcommittees, which is the Martin Luther King events that we run every year. And I've had the really good fortune of working with 6 groups of teenagers at this point. And it's really great to hear their thoughts about racial justice and then how they're going to encapsulate that into an event for the community.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. And then I just want to cover one more thing, which is our wellness programming, which we also offer scholarships for people who are unable to afford, an expensive fitness facility. So we're very proud of that. And we also provide a service called Encore, which allows cancer survivors to come and use our pool, and it's a free sort of supportive environment that has really changed a lot of lives.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So how do you sort of, when people come to you, how do you know that you're the right fit instead of Pettengill, or perhaps you would know if they need Jeanne Geiger, but do you sort of pass people on if you don't have the services that fit for them?
Right. So our organizations meet in a task force where they can talk with each other about services. And the YWCA is focused on affordable housing and childcare and youth leadership and wellness. And so we provide sort of those structural things, but then also like Ellie Davis on our staff is working to evaluate the needs of people who come to the YWCA, often the needs of our tenants, and is helping them find those services in the community that can help them with food insecurity or can help them with domestic abuse issues. So we can provide the contacts in the community.
Yes. Perfect, thank you. So Deborah Smith, I wanted to move on to the most important issues that we're sort of facing right now, which is COVID and a racial revolution. It feels like from this point forward, we're never going to be able to separate COVID and the murders that occurred and caused the racial revolution to begin. It feels like it's going to be forever together. And on Facebook, you or one of your beautiful organizations wrote, "We at Pettengill House stand in solidarity with those demanding justice and calling for an end to systemic racism and police brutality. It is a vital responsibility for each of us as actively engaged community members to educate ourselves, help raise awareness about human rights and racial issues, and constantly ask ourselves how we can take part in positive change here at home. We are proud to see so many of our local community leaders respond by rallying together with positive messages of solidarity, denouncing racism and advocating for justice. We pledge to stand firmly on the side of history that champions respect, acceptance, justice, and equal rights for all. So how have you mobilized? Are you finding, you used the word when we were talking earlier, pivots, and that seems to be the critical word right now. How is Pettengill having had to pivot? And are you constantly strategizing in order to serve the next crisis? How has COVID and racism affected your particular community? And I'm going to ask Julie to unmute you. Just a sec. Not done yet. Can you do it, Deborah, yourself?
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Oh, yikes.
So just before I answer that question, I just want to say one thing, that as far as the police in the area, 2 of our programs, one is Substance Addiction Initiative and Mental Health. We have formed really strong relationships, and I'm sure Kelly would speak to this too. And that's the biggest way of moving forward, in my estimate, to form positive relationships. The police have been partners with us and contracting with us for numerous years, and I only have really good things to say about all the communities that we work in. So I just want to say hats off to all the good work that the police departments are doing. As far as COVID, the racial, obviously our demographic, our clients really align with the demographics in the area. It's a low % of different racial and ethnic diversity in our clients, what we see, probably less than 4%. However, that doesn't mean that we haven't heard stories from some of our folks, and it doesn't mean that we haven't helped to advocate and intervene when necessary. I think because we have such a strong vision statement in our mission statement, that goes along with dignity and respect, regardless of race or any other reasons. So that I think we've got covered. We're always educating, we're always moving forward with those things. What we find COVID, the disparity that we see is really along with mental health issues and also with economic issues. I mean, I think COVID, obviously, I know, has affected all of us in so many ways, so many circumstances, myself included. I mean, I think we need to talk a little bit about it in any forum about those effects and how it's raised anxiety and depression and an array of things, even with our senior programs, the isolation, the kids that are remote learning. But when you have already scarcity of resources and supports, and then something like this happens, it can really cause a lot more conflict, a lot more stress in homes that are already struggling. And we're just trying to do our best to support those families and those individuals. I mean, we have a lot of individuals that are homeless also. So getting out on a daily basis, we're reaching out to clients and just to try to stabilize and to actually keep people physically out of the hospital settings. So that's a ton of work. And our services now, like most, are remote, but even myself included, I have done curbside visits, home visits, just to try and stabilize. And that goes from kids too, that's not just adults. So it is a really big initiative. We've also gotten approval from some of the school districts to get some of their counselors and key personnel on board, because we developed a tool that we are using with a lot of people to find out what their real needs and how they're really doing. So the school districts are helping with that as volunteers for Pettengill, because it really is all hands on deck. But I can't say enough about the stress that it has placed on young families, older adults, every aspect.
And you know, it seems like it started and we were all like, okay, I can deal with this. And then as the weeks and weeks went by, the reality of it setting in. And I imagine that an organization like yours, you know, was probably in shock at first, but then you had to really hit the ground and develop, how are you going to reach your people? And speak, if you will, to the Aid for Amesbury. Like, that to me is a pivot, because that was just created for this. Is that correct?
Yes, and like you said, Paula, everything was so fluid, and so you're trying to address crisis level of need, and you're also trying to put protocols and procedures in place for your own organization to protect your own staff, and also for those that come in. And that was at the beginning, as everyone knows, that was changing like by the minute. And we're fortunate to have a strong advisory with some medical advisors on it too that were really helpful with that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. So we're going to move to Kelly now. So she's unmuted already, thank goodness. I feel like, Kelly, your clients are in like the belly of the fire all the time, and you must be too. The domestic violence high-risk team model is not only fascinating, but it just feels like that extra edge that was needed in order to really make headway in eradicating domestic violence. You've witnessed firsthand the danger of it in our community. Has the murder of George Floyd exacerbated domestic violence? And I read in the newsletter today that there were 2 million gun sales in the month of March in the United States, and that in Massachusetts alone, the increase in gun sales since COVID is 72%. So I imagine that your feet are in the fire right now, and it must be pretty scary out there in the world of domestic violence.
Yeah, we are anticipating that we are going to see an enormous surge in very severe domestic violence cases and potentially a spike in homicides. We feel like we have the perfect storm. We have survivors isolated with their partners for long periods of time. They're unable to access services, even though all of our services are available. They're unable to access them. They're afraid to call the police for exposure to virus or for putting their partner into the jail system, which we know has high populations of people with COVID. We're seeing high unemployment rates, which is something that increases domestic violence. And we see this skyrocketing, disturbing increase in gun purchases. So these three things together are very much concerning us that we're going to see an enormous surge in need as we start to come out of the shelter at home. And we're already starting to see it. Our numbers are starting to tick up. We're starting to hear an increase in sort of the severity of cases that we're seeing. So yes, we are very much concerned about what's to come. If we look towards other sort of crises like Hurricane Harvey, what happened after that, they saw an enormous spike in domestic violence. So we feel like we're at the very beginning of that surge.
And it feels like COVID that we're always in the anticipation mode. It's extremely hard, like as a small business, it's so hard to figure out when to open, how to open, and it's always changing. It feels like we're waiting for the second surge because of the protests that have occurred and so forth. And for you as well in your organization, it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's been a huge surge or uptick in gun sales. So you're, I'm sure, waiting.
Guns in the home increase the chance of a domestic violence homicide by five times, right? So if you have a gun in the home, it increases the likelihood of a homicide by 5 times. So yes, we're quite concerned about all that we're seeing. And, you know, I also just wanted to address a little bit about policing and sort of pick up what Deb said. Although we have excellent, committed police officers in our community, that doesn't mean that we don't have structural racism in policing, right? The police culture sort of has baked within it structural racism. And so we're also working with our coalition to really center Black voices and to think about police reforms. You know, it makes sense that police don't use chokeholds. We should have done that a long time ago. It makes sense when we have police officers that have 18 disciplinary actions for overuse of force that we don't hide them away from police department to the police department because we don't have a national registry to tell us that this is a bad cop, right? We don't need to wait on those things. Those are common sense approaches. So I just want to differentiate, we were very glad to see our local police come out with strong statements of solidarity, and we will continue to ask for their support as we move forward with policing reforms that make sense to sort of change police culture. So there's a difference between police culture and policing than individual good police officers that we see in our community all the time doing good work. And I think it's also important that when we look at outcomes, we are de-aggregating the data. Are we only looking at what are the outcomes for white women? We have to de-aggregate the data so we can look at outcomes by race to really see if we are having impacts for everyone in the same way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Very thoughtful response. So Lila, I went on your beautiful website and there is an amazing letter from the US CEO of YWCA, Alejandra Castillo. It's really pretty unequivocal. In part, she writes, as the CEO of YWCA, I assure you that we stand with and support the millions of Americans who are protesting in communities across the country to express their frustration, disappointment, and disillusionment in a system that perpetuates structural racism. This is a time when we will be judged not only by our words, but most importantly, by the actions we take to be agents of change. These are the times that define the soul of a nation and bear testament to the humanity and moral values of a generation. We stand united as YWCAs to give life to our mission to eliminate racism and empower women. I don't know why it's emotional to me, but it is. Can you speak to some of the things that the Y Newburyport is developing and activating in our current hydra-headed crisis of COVID and racist violence? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And those are really moving words, and thank you for reading them here. So we take those words very seriously. So we believe that we will be judged by the actions that are reignited from these incidences. And just last night, the advocacy committee of the YWCA board was meeting to really discuss some of the legislation that we can support. So that includes some of the things that Kelly was just speaking of, but we're also trying to figure out if we're going to direct our attention locally, statewide, or nationally. So right now, the YWCA, we are, as a board, looking internally and figuring out what is the best way forward. How can we leverage the privilege that we have as a predominantly white board to affect the most change? So the advocacy committee is a new committee. We formed that in 2019, and really that was a way for us to step up our legislative and our advocacy presence within the greater Newburyport area, because as I mentioned before, we have really been working at this from an economic empowerment model, which we are still very, very much committed to, but we also realize that there are some structural things that we need to help change. So over the next coming weeks, we'll have a list of recommendations and a list of legislation or events that we are supporting, and that would be one way that we would love to stay in touch with this huddle, is by giving to you sort of the actions forward that we have researched and that we have designated sort of the most impactful and the most likely to create change. So that is sort of where we are on the racism work. But in terms of COVID-19 and how that has spotlighted injustice in the community, it has really deepened economic disparities with our clients and with the people we work with, particularly around food insecurity. Many of our tenants were laid off because they work in the service industry and they have very tenuous economic backgrounds. And so we're really working with them to make sure to affirm for them that they have a safe place to come home to at the end of the day. Many of them don't have the luxury of working from home. And so really it's boots on the grounds working with our tenants to make sure that they have the security they need, especially because they're going to workplaces that may or may not be providing for their safety. So those are two major things. I also, just want to circle back around to George Floyd and the response of the YWCA. YWCA Southeastern Massachusetts is sponsoring conversations around race. And I would really recommend that people here join those conversations. I'll be joining them myself. You can find all of that information on our website.
That's so fantastic. You know, it's a beautiful thing that you mentioned conversation, because I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I want to know so much more about each of your organizations. You're like the heart and soul of our community and extended families. And if nothing else, the conversation has started. I know you must all be experiencing that. And, you know, I have a 32-year-old son in Los Angeles who is teaching me about things like defunding the police. I didn't understand any of that. He's been out protesting. He helps me sort of ground myself in small actions, accomplishing great things. And I think that our conversations here are the beginnings of that as well. And I hope that this is just the beginning. So now I want to move on to how we can help. And you're going to have to just bear with me while I get this gosh darn PowerPoint to do what I want it to do. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to go from the beginning, and then I'm going to go like this. Okay. And we will start with Pettengill House. So, Miss Deborah, you have a ginormous list of services, but the red ones were particularly of interest. You can hit whichever ones you want, and Maria is on board to take notes. And I just want everybody to know also that we will have time for questions and answers, and I know the chat box is full and Debbie will help us with that. But Deborah Smith, could you talk to us about some of these highlighted areas, most specifically in terms of what your community can do to help? Thank you.
So Paula, is it best if I highlight the red ones that you've identified?
It would be great if you did, and any others. I don't want to stop the flow of your imagination or inspiration.
No, absolutely. So yeah, because we're a wraparound service organizations, we do have an array of services, like I said earlier, ranging from basic needs to a lot of other areas, education always being the cornerstone. So crisis intervention services, we can get calls from, we work closely, like I said earlier, with other organizations, and sometimes we're called just to do an assessment into a home or in the school setting or community setting. And we practice mental health, first aid, and you know, where everybody's a licensed social worker. Myself, I'm also a substance addiction counselor with a master's in psychology and counseling. So we are, you know, whether it's in our agency setting, a school setting, or like I said, in the community, we're available working with the police to do an initial assessment. And then if needed, we were going to make arrangements to have somebody screened for crisis or take them to the next level of care. And how that ties into the pandemic right now is that we are really working hard to stabilize people, to keep them so that those services are not needed or they can be done remotely. The emergency assistance program would refer to, it also helps with stabilization because that we have contracts in, actually when you mentioned Aid for Amesbury earlier, that would be one program that that Mayor Gove initiated to help, you know, small business and individuals get back on their feet. We have the same thing going on in Newburyport with Mayor Holliday. There's a big program that just got kicked off there for the same reason. So we may identify needs of people. We were doing those things before. And also, so if we can help with some of the financial needs in the emergency assistance program, then we can also provide the other additional support services needed at that time. We started in 1994, and it was started with a food pantry in Salisbury. That still goes on. Obviously, we work very closely with our neighbors' table, but every year we provide over 100,000 meals to individuals and families. Right now, of course, everything's curbside and delivered as needed. And
donations, Deborah? Are you accepting food donations or just
absolutely? Absolutely. Food donations, they go into they're kept in, reviewed for contamination, and they're held in isolation for a period of time, and then they're brought in. So the staff and volunteers there are incredible. And we even have a senior, we have a big senior support program in the area. And we even have a special day just for seniors to do that.
And do you work with Nourishing the North Shore? Do they provide fresh produce?
Yes, they're fantastic.
Aren't they great? Yeah, they
fantastic. Are. So the curbside actually has been really, really incredible. And I could see us going through that until the weather changes, actually. So, because it's been so effective. The next one that I see highlighted here is the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act. So how Pettengill started was actually a grant that a lot of folks and professionals in the community before I got on board wrote a grant because the school nurse and principal in Salisbury at the time said, we have to do something. And so a group of people came together and wrote a grant to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That was our School Link Service Program. And the goal of that is that all kids come to school ready to learn. So, you know, grants and fundings and everything change year after year. And we lost those from time to time. We've lost those grants, but we've kept the initiative because it works so well. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Act is actually a federal program which enables children that become homeless to stay in their home school setting. So in other words, it's in an hour radius. So we have contracts with the local schools that we will help kids and families to still access the school, because that's the important part of with the children's, I mean, not knowing where you're going to lay your head at night is enough stress without having to change schools. So it's an unfunded federal program. So the school districts are required to provide transportation and an array of other services. And we are the tier 2 with them, and we follow up with all of those families and work in and out of the schools and in the homes, so that those children are getting what they need to, and their rights are kept in place.
So instead of highlighting the senior support program, which I would love to on the substance, I think we should go to the winter coat drive and find out, are you still going to do that this year? Because time is
you know, yeah, that's one of our basic need programs too. And I would say at this time that we probably, in all likelihood, it might not happen. What we, you know, at least not in the format that we're used to. It doesn't mean that anyone in need isn't going to be serviced. They absolutely are. You know, you mentioned that basic need program. We also have the Operation Backpack program, which we've already identified will not happen this year as it is too, similar to the winter coat drive. But because we know the therapeutic needs of the kids that we identified earlier that are struggling, we actually, again, are working with Newburyport School District and the youth organization over there, and in Amesbury and Pawtucket, all the school districts, Salisbury, Triton, and we're doing a school supply and arts and crafts kind of drive. We didn't make it a public thing because of obvious, you know, with the pandemic and everything like that, but it's fully in place. So again, starting with basic needs and working the way up, and that'll be helpful for everybody in the family.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Kelly. Here we go to Jeanne Geiger. Look at that. Look at those beautiful women.
Beautiful staff, yes.
Oh my God, they're beautiful. The mission. And here are some of the places that I wanted you to land if you could. Kelly.
Sure. So our 24-hour hotline is open, as it has been since the pandemic. We have never shut down our hotline. And I would say that's the first thing you can help us with, is spread the word that our services are available. They have never shut down. All the shelters in Massachusetts are open. The hotlines are open. Our lawyer is meeting with people who need our help over Zoom. We are serving our kids that need our help, our counseling clients, our little kiddos, through Zoom. Our support groups are happening through Zoom. So please spread the word that if anyone needs our help, we are open and available, and our hotline is ready to help anybody in the community. Our advocacy and support services are really at the core of what we do. when someone comes in and they're not sure why they're there, or someone told them to come and they're not even quite sure if they're in the right place, our advocate will sit with them and talk to them about what's going on in their relationship. Our rapid response teams is really our partnership with police. So after a police call for help, after a domestic violence call, which for some women, it is the worst night of their lives, we follow up to explain to them what's next. They're scared. They've been up all night. Their children have seen the police come and go from the home, and maybe their father was arrested. And we pick it up from there and really try to pick up the pieces and walk them through that difficult time. Transitional housing, we offer rental assistance for folks who need our help. We also have a couple of transitional housing units that people can stay in for about 18 months while they get back on their feet. Children's Safety Project, you know, kids see and hear everything in the home. They feel the tension of living in a home where there's domestic violence. You know, survivors tell us all the time they've been living in a home where there's been violence for 20 years. And I say, what made you walk through our door today? And I know the answer. It's because of my kids, right? So I can take the violence, but he finally turned the violence towards my child. And that's the day I decided to call you. I hear that story over and over again. And so we're there to make sure that we don't repeat that generational cycle of violence by making sure services and counseling services are available for kids so they can make sense of what they have experienced and they can start to heal. Then our Family Safety Project is our court-ordered program for men. You know, we have to work on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
But a few other things that we could use your help with is to, if you know somebody who is in a violent home, it is not as easy to get to us physically as it was before. And survivors may not be able to call us like they could before because they're being monitored in the home. So reach out to your friend. And if you need our help in being a support for a friend who's in an abusive situation, please reach out to us. It is not easy to support somebody in an abusive situation. And we're there to support you.
Kelly, are you still training volunteers right now?
We will have a volunteer training. I'm not sure when, but you can reach out to us and we will let you know when the next volunteer training is. We're always looking for volunteers to lend their talents. Volunteers answer our hotline at night, always with a staff backup. Volunteers go to court and assist people with restraining orders. Volunteers provide childcare while our women are doing support group. Volunteers are critical to our mission. And I would also say, get in the conversation with us. Join us on social media. Let's start talking. You know, we're really working right now on amplifying Black voices and make sure we're centering Black voices, which we haven't always done in the domestic violence movement. And we're personally trying to do a better job with that. So we'd love for you to join us on social media.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And Miss Lila, here's the YWCA, Courage, Compassion, Commitment. And what I wanted you to talk about was the mission in action. The last three, especially the Stand Against Racism, Week Without Violence, Get Involved, Act Now. That seems all very current to the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll add a few more to that if that's okay
please.
with you. Yes. So in terms of racial justice and civil rights, we have three major things that I would like to ask everyone here today to do. So number one is to complete your 2020 census, which sometimes gets a chuckle when I do events like these, but filling out the census, I would argue, is one of the number one most impactful civic duties that you can do. So for every person who fills out the census, it's estimated that about $2,500 will go to the community to help organizations like the ones that you're highlighting here today. So please, please, please fill out your census. We only do it once every 10 years, and that is used to also draw districting lines for voting to determine representation, etc. So please, if you have not filled out your census, it's not too late. You won't get in trouble for being late. So please fill it out and make sure everyone you know has done so. Also, make sure that you're registered to vote. I'm assuming that everyone here is registered to vote, but because of COVID, many people who are turning 18 are missing sort of those opportunities, those natural opportunities to register to vote. So please make sure that you're following up with your newly 18-year-olds to make sure that they're registering. And then, as I mentioned before, the YWCA Southeastern Massachusetts is having conversations about race, community conversations. They're spaces where you can be vulnerable and ask questions. You will probably also be pushed, but we all need to be pushed right now. So again, that information is on our website, and I encourage all of you to join in those. And then the Week Without Violence, so that is a national program that occurs every November. So it's a little bit out of our time block right now, but again, as we sort of make more inroads with your organization, we will send you the information as we get it. And oh, that's okay. That's all right.
Keep talking. Good.
Okay. And then I think, as everyone here has sort of alluded to, really financial contributions to the organization go a long way. So that can be cash donations, but then also the YWCA is a really great organization where you can use our facilities and contribute to our mission. So if you're looking for a new fitness center, use the YWCA and know that the money that you are paying towards using the elliptical or to using the weights is going to be supporting our mission. And the same with our childcare services. So send your children to the YWCA childcare because it's helping other people who might need a sliding scale or who might need a voucher. But then also you're ensuring that the children who are there are getting racial justice education. So it's a great way to give financially to an organization, but also contribute to the cause as well.
Thank you so much. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Debbie Hart-Klein, who's been managing the chat, and ask you, Debbie, to tell us some of, if the questions could be consolidated, that would be great, but go, and I see Barbara Hiltz on the call. I just want to say hi, Barbara. It's so good to see you from very far away. Okay.
So we're at 7:29 and we have a lot of good questions. So I think what I'm going to do is combine some of the general ones. And then if it's okay, Paula, maybe we should ask the speakers some of the specific ones separately. When we send a follow-up note, we can do that.
Okay, sounds wonderful. Yes.
So a couple of general ones ask about partnerships that you have. One is whether you have partnerships with any other similar organizations in the region. And the other, which is only connected because of the partnership issue, is whether you're working with any of the local businesses who your needs have increased and they're struggling with their business. I know there's a, sorry, the Y and Henry Bears Park have been working together where we as consumers can buy a gift bag, which helps Henry Bears Park, and then they donate that to kids in need. So that's sort of two different but related questions about partnerships you have with and are looking to have.
Well, one would be wouldn't it be the Amesbury project
Right.
at Pettengill House? That would be one of them, wouldn't it, Deborah?
Absolutely. We can't do what we couldn't do what we do without community partnerships at the local level or at the state level. So, I mean, to really provide best practices, you absolutely need that from every aspect of the community. And we are blessed at having the support of the community. We wouldn't even be here today or be able to get through this pandemic without the community. And Paula, your point's well taken. It's also a time where it's time for us to give back to the businesses that help us all along all the time. So whatever they're in need of, that's why we're honored to help with Aid for Amesbury and the Newburyport initiative to help small business and those in need. Absolutely. Couldn't do it without them.
Thank you. Kelly or Lila, do you have something that you would like to add to that?
So I would like to, I agree with Deb that we are blessed to receive the support of the community. The organization does not exist without that support. Year in and year out, the community steps up and supports our services and makes it our 24-hour hotline exist. We have many local partnerships with businesses. I hate to name a few because I know I'm going to leave some out. I know they're all listed on our website. We hope people will go there and support them all because they support us. And we're also part of a coalition. So there is a Massachusetts coalition called Jane Doe of domestic violence agencies that serve across the state. And we're all sort of connected. And so if we need to put someone in shelter and get them out of this community because it's not safe anymore, we can call on our sister programs and we're all connected through that. We also coordinate with them policy work around violence against women.
Thank you. So Debbie, how about if we take two more, if you can consolidate?
Yeah, there are several questions about food donations and sort of whether your demands are greater than they have been, whether you're getting what you need, if you'd prefer cash donations versus actual food, and if there's a way that any of us can provide fresh food, not just canned and boxed, but are cooking further or preparing things. So those were all the food related questions.
So I guess it would be Deborah, really.
Yeah. So I mean, we appreciate anything that any donations, obviously. I think because of the pandemic and the having to handle food differently, that sometimes the cash donations can be better utilized at this time. It's not to say that the food drives that are being done, it's just because of the quarantine time that we need to give things. But we, Boston Food Bank and a lot of other organizations are involved with that. We actually have a young man in Newburyport that's done several food drives on his own and initiated that. So all of those means are fabulous, and it's what people can do. That's the whole thing. It's like there's nothing that's whether somebody wants to give $5 or do an enormous food drive. I mean, the support that we're receiving right now is incredible on every level. So again, hats off to the community at large. And food right now it's in abundance, I think, for our organization. It just, every time that the quarantine unit is emptied, more comes through. So it's an incredible 9 communities. Absolutely.
I love what you said too, Deborah, about everybody gives what they can. And tonight, I hope that tonight's meeting in a way encourages us all to just examine, find out about the organizations because we care about them, because they support our community family, and give where you want to give and how you want to give, because there's so much opportunity, obviously. And Debbie, can you just tell us how we are going to follow up on this? Because I kind of forget what our procedure is going to be from here.
So we had talked about sending a note out to everyone who's on the call. So if you can put your email address, I've taken down everyone's name, but of course a lot of names are, just first names on your Zoom, and we're going to send out a note to everybody who's on the call and also on the Huddle list, just as a summary for what came out of tonight, what actions we can all follow up on concretely. And so that's what I was suggesting, that with some of these more specific questions, we ask each of the speakers or the relevant speaker for the response separately, and we can put something in writing.
And so while people may be adding their email list, their email to the chat, maybe we have one more question that we could ask.
Okay, now you've thrown me because well, there was an interesting comment that relates to domestic violence from someone, and I'm sorry it's not in front of me, so I didn't take the name, who's a domestic violence victim, who's pointing out that domestic violence affects everyone of all races, and that's something to keep in mind. And something that's not in here, but that's also worth keeping in mind, is that it affects people of all socioeconomic levels. And I wonder if Kelly might speak a little bit to what they see at the Geiger Center in terms of.
It absolutely does. So we see survivors who have great resources, but really their lawyer simply doesn't understand the dynamics of domestic violence, or their counselor doesn't really understand what they're going through, where the situation is getting so scary. They've referred them to us, even though they have the ability to access private counseling. And we also see people who don't have access to those things, who, if for us, they would not have a lawyer for their child custody case. They would not have access to counseling for their children. They simply couldn't afford the copay or, the gas to get their child back and forth. So domestic violence absolutely affects people of all socioeconomic status. However, people with less access to wealth and people of color tend to have worse outcomes, right? Higher rates of domestic violence in communities of color, higher rates of domestic violence homicide in communities of color, 2.5 times the rate of domestic violence homicide in the Black community. And in Massachusetts, Black women are killed at 4 times the rate of white women. And so although domestic violence happens across the socioeconomic spectrum and across the racial spectrum, we do see disproportionate negative outcomes for women of color and for women with less means.
You know, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart how grateful I am for you 3 women on the front lines of my community. You are helping our family of community survive, and we wouldn't be able to do this without you. So I would like to just ask Julie to unmute everybody and give them a round of applause so they can actually hear our love for them. Thank you so much for everything that you do every single day of your lives. And I'm so grateful to know more about your beautiful organizations. And I know that we will be active helpers to you from here forward. So thank you so much for your time and for your evening. Thank you everybody for being here.
Hi, Barbara.
Thank you,
Thank you, Paula.
Barbara! It's so good to see you.
Hi, Barbara Hilt.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, hello. Good to see you all. Yeah, I'm far away and I live in Mexico, so but my heart is still with you.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
Hi, Barbara.
Nancy, Barbara, I know your daughter now because of C10. She came to talk to the Huddle. And
Yeah.
she's wonderful.
Yeah.
Really wonderful.
And I haven't seen Lila for years.
I
but I'm so,
know. When I saw your name, I couldn't believe it.
I couldn't believe it. I saw your name and I'm so proud of the work you're doing. Good
Really,
to
Lila.
you.
You are so well spoken for your organization, Lila. Really, they have
thank you.
them in you.
Oh, good. Thank you. They've been great to me. So.
Deborah Smith, I hope you don't retire too soon.
Oh, don't, please don't.
I'm overdue.
No.
You're overdue. Oh no. But you know, how many COVID will you see in your lifetime? I mean, really. Thank you to the speakers and thank you to everybody who was here. You'll hear from us in follow-up. So have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you all.
Love you. Love you.